if we're looking at the actual origin of the dwarves and the elves' distrust from each other, it stems from lots of events in their history. But one that people view as the most damaging to their relationship would occur in the year 502 of the First Age, which is approximately 6,700 years before the events of the Lord of the Rings. So, I have a little story here.
Okay.
So, get ready. Dwarves and elves worked and traded together civilly. And dwarves would often help elves when it came to building and smithing, including helping to build the Menegroth, or also known as the Thousand Caves, which was a city in the realm of Doriath, which was one of the most powerful elven realms in the First Age. So Doriath was ruled by King Thingol, who shows up in, you've heard of him in the Children of Húrin and the Silmarillion, and Beren and Luthien as well. So we hear a lot about this King Thingol character in the older stories.
Thingol and Melian. Yeah.
Melian, yeah, very good. So we know that in Tolkien's lore, jewels and jewelry are very important. Obviously, Lord of the Rings, and especially to royalty. And King Thingol came into possession of two immense pieces of craftsmanship. So the first
was a thimble.
Thingol has a thimble.
Thingol has a thimble
on his thumb. No, it wasn't a thimble. It was called the Noglamir, or the Necklace of the Dwarves, which was combined with the craft of the dwarves and gems from Valinor. It was of great beauty, and it gave beauty to its wearer. And despite it being loaded with gems, it sat very lightly on the neck. So that was the first piece of craftsmanship that Thingol.
As well.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I was going to just straight up say it, but could you guess what the other gem was that Thingol had in his possession?
Is it a gem or is it a? It's not like
it's a
not
famous
like
one.
Okay, it's not like the helm or anything.
No, it's a gem.
Like he didn't have a Silmaril.
Yes,
he did.
He did. So that managed to come into his possession. It was one of the 3 Silmarils created by whom?
Created by, I'm going blank. Oh God. I can't think of it. Give me a first letter.
F.
Fëanor.
Yeah, well done. All right,
my God.
Cool. I know that one.
It's
one that's obvious, but it would throw you.
Yeah.
So
it's too many
Fëanor,
F names.
There's too many. But for anyone that doesn't know, Fëanor is one of the greatest elf smiths, and probably one of the greatest smiths ever. And if you don't know what the Silmarils are, they were 3 gems known as the Silmarils, and they play an extremely important role in the events of the First Age, which you can read about in the books such as the Silmarillion and Beren and Luthien. But anyways, moving on, King Thingol wanted to combine both the Noglamir and the Silmaril to form the most beautiful piece of craftsmanship in Middle-earth. But this was no easy task, so he entrusted the dwarves from the city Nogrod, that happened to just be in Thingol's city of Menegroth at the time. He just saw them there and was like, hey, you guys, come help me with my smithy work. So they agreed, but this did take a long time, and King Thingol was very impatient, and he often visited the smithies to check up on the progress. But sure enough, when it was completed, it was beautiful. The light of the Silmaril actually reflected amongst the gems, and it truly was the perfect piece of work, and anyone that looked upon it was entranced. However, the dwarves, they had grown greedy, of course, and when they finished their work, they refused to hand it to Thingol. They argued that the Noglamir was, in fact, a dwarven artifact, which they're right. The dwarves actually created this Noglamir. It was gifted to Finrod, who was an elf, but Finrod was dead at this point, and they claimed that Thingol had no claim to it, so it belonged to the dwarves. Naturally, Thingol reacted very angrily and insulted them, as we read in the Silmarillion, quote, bade them with shameful words, begone unrequited out of Doriath. He called the dwarves stunted people, and this angered them, so they killed the king and fled the city.
Oh, wow.
The elves then chased down the dwarves and retrieved the Noglamir and killed the dwarves in the process, but 2 managed to escape and return to their city of Nogrod, where they told their kin that the elves betrayed them and were ordered to kill the dwarves by the king, as he wanted to cheat them out of their payment. So naturally, this stirred up anger and vengeance within the dwarves in the city of Nogrod. Wow. So they then raised an army and marched back to Menegroth and battled with the elves victoriously, and then completely sacked the city. So it was a...
So the dwarves were victorious?
The dwarves, yeah, basically, dwarves were there killing Thingol, then tried to run away. Elves caught up to them, killed the dwarves and stole the jewelry, the Noglamir, got back to the city, but 2 escaped, and they went back to Nogrod and they were basically like, King Thingol sent out his elves and killed us all, and they just didn't want us to pay for, or they didn't want to pay.
Get some fake news.
Yeah, fake news. And then the dwarves came up with this huge army, went back to Menegroth and completely destroyed the place.
Wow.
So
that was mess with the dwarves.
Yeah, well, or the elves, like they were just mental back then.
Yes,
but
Silmarillion's mental.
The Silmarillion, it's crazy. If you think the elves are like beautiful creatures that only care about peace and stuff, then go read the Silmarillion. But
in the third age, they were a bit more chill. First age was
I think
madness.
I suppose they've evened out, or they've become a little bit more mature in the third age.
Exactly.
But they were only a couple of thousand years old in the Silmarillion and the first age. So
yeah,
but that was
tweens.
That didn't cause an all-out war between the races. Like the bloodshed actually ended there, but there was a clear split divide between the 2 races, and they may not have been at war after that straight away, but there was forever distrust and animosity.
Yeah, because they used to be good mates before. Like when we know that, for example, the doors of Moria, they were built and built by the elves, because the elves used to live outside that part of Moria, and then they used to pass through Moria to do their trading business and all that. And there was lots of friendship and trade between the elves and the dwarves back in the day. So obviously that must have caused a huge immediate change to that relationship. And as you said, they didn't have to go to war immediately, but it was a big shift.
Well, I think, I don't know the exact dates. I know this was 502 of the first age, but I don't know when the Doors of Durin were created. But it is important to note that it's mostly the Sindar elves and Grey elves that kind of held on to this animosity with the dwarves. And then pretty much all the dwarves were always kind of angry with elves. But there were sections, so you're right, there was the elves of Eregion and the dwarves of Khazad-dûm. I think this was after this feud. They still managed to work together, and they had trade, and there were it's not every single dwarf and elf hated each other, but there are examples of
that's cool.
Stories where they got on, but yeah, the elves in general would never forget what had happened to their ancient elven realm and the murder of their king, and whilst the dwarves would forever blame the elves, and they didn't know how they were lied to. So it was kind of the fault of those 2 random guys that got away, in my opinion.
Yeah,
those guys that just lied to the dwarves, and that's what the dwarves built their trust and hatred on elves.
Yeah, I can see the dwarves saying that they have a claim to that necklace piece. But I think it's a bit ridiculous if the king comes and gives them the necklace and the Silmaril, and he's like, I want you to join these 2 together, and they don't say anything about it. Then they're like, we will do that, and then later they're like, okay, now they're joined together, this part's ours, so it's all ours. It's I think a bit of a sneaky move by the dwarves.
Yeah, I didn't put in any other quotes, but I think when the dwarves, or when Thingol gave tasked them with this mission, the dwarves were immediately overcome with lust. But they were like, okay, we'll accept it. But I think it wasn't, like I said, they grew greedy, but I think they were like, right, we all love this piece straight away. And naturally, if they're spending weeks and months working with it, they're like, what are we doing this for? Let's just take it.
Yeah.
Take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that story shows how greed, lies, and lust over gems really split apart these 2 races. And for generations afterwards, the dwarves believed their version of the events, and the elves believed their own. So again, it's kind of like modern day fake news, where you're just going to believe what you were taught when you were a child, and it was passed down through generation. And I suppose it lived on in the memory.
Very good. That's interesting. I'd forgotten most of that.
All of it. Well, that's how the Silmarillion works. You read one chapter and you forget the previous one. So
yeah.